Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. I'm Christina Joy. Welcome to Scholar Hour with Dr. Traci. Yes. Yes, y'all better clap it up for Dr. Traci. Dr. Traci is a gem, to say the least. And tonight we have our lovely co-host, my lovely co-host, Michaela, aka the store manager of Sankofa. Give it up for Michaela. Tonight we're in for a very special conversation because, first of all, we love Dr. Traci. Let's get one thing clear. Dr. Traci puts on for Sankofa, and we put on for Dr. Traci. Like for real. And Dr. Traci wrote a book quite some time ago now, huh? And it's called Steve Biko, The Radical Gospel of Black Consciousness. And she wrote this for her dissertation because, she is Dr. Traci, and you better put some respect on her name and her degree, you know what I'm saying? Well, first of all, let's say hi to Dr. Traci. How are you, Dr. Traci? What's going on?
I'm good. Hello. A little nervous, of course, but other than that, I'm good. Glad to be here. I really appreciate Sankofa inviting me to this moment to be able to have this conversation surrounding my book here. Well, actually, my dissertation in the form of a book. And Christina for, pushing me. They always, Michaela, Christina, always pushes me to go outside of my comfort zone. So I thank them for doing that and always showing me so much love and definitely giving thanks to Halle, aka Pop Pop, and Sharikiana for their love and support and hospitality and welcoming me. Oh, I'm getting tongue-tied already. Welcoming me into the Sankofa family and allowing these opportunities. So I'm very grateful to them. I love them all. I love everyone here. Who is a part of the Sankofa family. It's mine
now. Michaela, did you want to greet the audience?
Oh, sure. Hey y'all, how y'all feeling? You good? Thank you for being here. I'm gonna scoot a little bit away from the microphone. Yeah. My name is Michaela, and I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy that Dr. Traci is a part of the Sankofa family. If y'all don't know, she also does something on Tuesdays called Tuesdays with Dr. Traci. Not only is she a professor, but she really is someone who's full of wisdom and knowledge, and I would love it if y'all would take advantage of that by asking her questions like when we come to the end or tuning in to Tuesdays with Dr. Traci.
Plug. Shameless plug. Today we took over Tuesdays with Dr. Traci for a scholar hour. So, Dr. Traci, I wanted to know, one, how did you get started on this journey towards your doctorate? What is your doctorate in? I know it's in African studies, but for the people, let them know what's your doctorate's in. Why did you want this doctorate?
Well, it's kind of funny, actually. Since I went back to school late in life, after the initial degree, the undergraduate degree, I was like, oh, nah, I'm not doing anything. But I had a professor who was also my advisor, Dr. Shagun Bagashan. And he was so supportive and so loving and kind over at Howard because all three of my degrees are there. And he looked at me one day and he said, "H.U., you know." And he was like, I see you one day teaching, having your PhD. And I was like, doing what? You mean having to go back to school again and again? I was like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, ha, ha, ha. And I was just laughing. He's like, you're laughing now. But surely he saw it long before I did, and he believed in me more than I believed in myself. So I'm always grateful to him, but I ended up going on to the School of Divinity to get my Master of Arts in Religious Studies, and then after that, on to African Studies. Now, what was interesting was that they had a philosophy program here at Howard that they ended up shutting down because that was my hope to be able to go in that direction. But as life would have it, I was still, after speaking to some of my advisors, like Dr. Badagashian and Dr. Asike, I ended up going into the African studies because then I could still look at philosophy, but from an African perspective. So that really drew me in. And so that's how I ended up with my degree in African studies. And as you can tell, just looking at the book, what I'm basically looking at is Steve Biko's philosophy as it relates to Black consciousness. So you can kind of see all of that coming together, as well as the religious studies. Okay, and of course the BA was in philosophy. So they all kind of come neatly together in the book. And that's what landed me in African studies. And then I actually fell in love with it. And I was just learning so much. It was such a rich experience. And I'm grateful to the faculty at Howard University in African studies and my dissertation advisor, Dr. Chong.
So Dr. Traci, can you tell us who is Steve Biko? Can we start there? Who is this man?
Okay, I feel like I'm getting tag teamed. Who is Steve Biko? Oh gosh, there is so much to talk about when it comes to Steve Biko. And I think that's really why I wanted to do the research. We know Steve Biko as the revolutionary, fighting against apartheid in South Africa, right? That's what basically everybody knows. That usually when we look at these iconic figures, especially revolutionaries, we just see them in that light. But we don't get to know the story behind the man or the woman. And so that was my hope, to be able to dig more into who he was as a person, what helped to shape him, what helped to establish his value system that he would later build this movement upon, you know. So in that way, I wanted to know who he was. So you see that he is a son of Africa, born and raised in South Africa. You see him, I guess, hit center stage in the late 1960s as it relates to the Black consciousness movement, because during this time, a lot of the leaders, okay, like Nelson Mandela and Robert Sobukwe from the ANC and PAC, they were underground or banned or imprisoned, exiled, you know, so there was what they would call a lull or a silence that had taken place in South Africa as far as having leaders that were above ground, speaking out or speaking truth to power as it related to the apartheid government. So that's when Steve Biko comes into play, and you see him rise to this major point in history where he becomes that voice, that person to really lead a movement of really college students, but it then began to expand beyond college students, because you know campuses are a place where things go down. That's where people, you know, they get their fires, you know, that fire gets started, gets lit there, and that's exactly what happened. So he and many of his colleagues there, they ended up getting together and they stretched it out, going back to high schools, other college campuses, and then to people in the community. And so the Black consciousness movement ended up growing. So it went from a student thing to a community thing to a national thing, okay? And I'll even say an international thing with the Black consciousness movement. He became the head person, the leadership, the spokesperson for the group mainly. And he became the face of it, and he became the father of the Black consciousness movement. And he really used, how can I say, like civil disobedience to turn South Africa upside down. And as we will find out, he ended up being killed or executed because of his work, because of his anti-apartheid rhetoric. And I mean, he wasn't just doing it, he was doing a lot of things, which I know we'll get into later, so I won't go too far into that right now. But with that, they ended up taking his life, okay? And then you see him, it actually grew bigger. After that, it just grew, I mean, expansively. He ended up having like 22,000 people, I think, at his funeral, which is pretty, that's a large funeral. Now, I know Black funerals are large, but I've never been to one with 22,000 people. So it was amazing how big. This was how he was able to unify the masses of people and bring them together like that. So after they killed him, it was like a seed sown in the ground, and it just grew amazing crop. And his message spread far and wide, which is why even now here in the United States, I'm talking about him these many years later, because his message still speaks. His spirit, his life. It is definitely a living word.
Ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Okay, so the living word. You have themes, of course, even with the title of the book of like religiosity, the radical gospel. So you're getting into like a preaching or a spiritual or religious thing. And even in the beginning, you talk about what you're about to. You preface the book saying you're comparing him or you're drawing parallels to Jesus. Like, at what point in your research did you realize that this was a spiritual thing or a spiritual approach that you wanted to take, looking at his radicalism?
Good question. Well, like I said, when I first read his message, when I just saw the quote from him, it was just a quote. And when I saw that quote, he was like, he wasn't afraid to die, that y'all gonna have to kill me, because if you're gonna come at me and fight me, I'm gonna fight you back. And the only way you're gonna be able to keep me from fighting you back pretty much is to bind my hands together, my feet, and you're gonna have to lock me down. Because otherwise I'm gonna come back at you. When I read that, something just went through me. So at that point, I knew that there was a lot of spirit there, but I did not know how deep it would be. So after I started to research, then I was like, oh my goodness, I started to realize the parallels. So it's like the research started to evolve. And then, so that's when I was like, oh my goodness. And when you look at the Black consciousness tenets, what they were using to establish it, and you see all these principles that are very much related to Christianity, which isn't surprising because they all were pretty much raised in Christian homes, or they went to Christian schools, and so on and so forth. So this was not a surprising thing, you know? So I was like, okay. But when I started reading more about Biko's life, what he went through, it's like I started to notice the comparison. And I'm like, oh wow, it's like scriptures will come to mind and things are coming. I'm like, oh wow, like wait a minute. So it was like the deeper I was able to dig into his life, the more I was able to find out about this spiritual aspect that I hadn't really fully noticed before. So when it came time to actually give that proposal to do the research, they looked at me like, what? I was like, oh no. Because they were like, they couldn't see it at first, but later on, it began to make sense, and they could see how it began to come together, because there were a lot of parallels, even to my surprise. I mean, more than what I had even anticipated. So, and when you realize how they applied Black consciousness to their lives as it being an attitude change, a way of mind, a way of life, how they live, you saw it almost like the gospel. You know, this was something you applied, this was something you lived by, this is who you were. And that's how they embodied that message. And so you see them talking about it, sharing, proselytizing, sharing this good news, or gospel, if you will, of Black consciousness. So you can definitely see how they really believe in that, because it was still so much associated with God, which was part of what they were doing, was to be able to bridge the gap between Black South Africans and God, because colonization has stripped them of that relationship, you know, with God. So they was like, no, we have to restore this, and we have to get people, remind them of the faith that they have in God, and then also to give them hope. So it was very important for him to make that connection himself, even though he might not have been a proponent of, you know, Jesus, no, that wasn't him either. But he understood the importance of faith and spirituality in the battle that they were getting ready to take on, because it had to do with spirit, but it also had to do with the mind. So he was looking at it from a psychological point of view as well as a spiritual point of view.
Yeah. How do you think that when Steve Biko came into your life, what was going on in your life, and did finding him cause a turning point for you in your Black consciousness?
Living while Black in America. pretty much, especially as a Black woman. There was so much, really, there was so much going on in the news. There were more cases of police brutality that were being exposed. Not that they weren't happening before, because we would all hear about them in our local communities in one way or another, but with cell phones and all of that, you can see this happening around the country. Okay, and so with that type of information coming at you constantly, you're reminded of the oppression that is still experienced by the Black community here in the United States. So there were so many things that I could relate to personally that I'm hearing him talk about that I was like, oh wow, yes, this is something that we experienced. This is something I've seen. So in that way, I was able to connect to him, and yes, it drew me deeper into having a Black consciousness, to be more conscious of who I was in the world, because that's what he was doing, right? He definitely is teaching people how to be aware and have a sense of consciousness, a self-awareness of who you are, as in the sense of being created by God, but then also your existential situation. Where were you? And that's how I was able to draw that connection. And I think for me, at that moment, it did create a deeper sense of appreciating who I was as a Black human being, but as a Black woman, and being proud of, not that I wasn't proud before, I was, but he just takes you there. There's no way you can read his writings and not be transformed. It is impossible. You begin to open your mind and look at things from a different perspective, through a different lens, and he challenges you to look at things very deep and to be very reflective, and then to move beyond yourself and look at the social ills in society, because that's where we really talk about sins. It's not as he would consider, the petty individual sins. It was like, no, what is going on in society? What is oppressing us? What is holding us back? What is keeping us from flourishing and becoming our full selves? What's keeping us from being free? And so when I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah. So that made me dig deeper and do more readings to become more conscious of who I was in the world. And then the main thing is the responsibility of sharing that knowledge and wisdom with others, not just holding it here. It has to, like it stopped here. No. And that's the very thing he was pushing. Like, it can't stop here. We have to unify and bring our 40 voices together to be able to deal with those things in society that are our enemy, in essence, or that hold us back and rob us of who we are as a people. So that's what I saw that. And I looked at it from a global context.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, I wanted to read some quotes, starting with this one. You said that was published in the Essential Steve Biko book. He said, "It is a call to men." This is from Steve Biko. "It is a call to men of conscience to offer themselves and sometimes their lives for the eradication of an evil. To a revolutionary, state evil is a major evil, for out of it flow countless other subsidiary evils that engulf the lives of both the oppressors and the oppressed. The revolutionary sees his task all too often as liberator, not only of the oppressed, but also of the oppressor. The revolutionary seeks to restore faith in life amongst all citizens of his country, to remove imaginary fears, and to heighten concern for the plight of the people." And this was in 1974, I believe. So I just wanted to know, we're in 2023. How does this apply to the revolutionaries of, say, the new ones, the ones that are finding their feet, especially as we look around at the genocides that are becoming more known, like through social media? In the same context that you started writing this book, when you started seeing like all the social injustices, I feel like there's a resurgence of global injustices that are being viewed now on a larger scale. So how can people use his words now as a global citizen, as global revolutionaries? And do you see that any, would you add anything to what he's saying? Since this is 1974, do you feel it still applies like exactly the same today?
Yes, I do feel it still applies, very much so. When you look at the dynamic with a superiority-inferiority dynamic within society. And whenever you have a particular ethnic group or national group, whatever, opposing, or let me not use opposing, oppressing another group because of their ethnicity, like whatever the case may be, then you have this problem where you have to end up freeing. Someone has to be free. Those who are being oppressed, usually they are going to only be able to take but so much before the situation explodes and they begin to fight back. So when you see that, there are some things that are already happening. You already have at that point revolutionaries that are probably already, like we see the situation across the east with the Israelis and the Palestinians, right? With what we haven't probably been able to fully see, some, if they really in depth in studying that region and what's been going on, there have been revolutionaries speaking out, speaking truth to power. Like, we are tired of this, we want this to change. There were even, I would say, those who were practicing civil disobedience, right? Because oppression is a form of violence against a person and against their culture. So when you see this happening, it gets to a point where, the people are no longer going to stand for it. Unfortunately, sometimes there are military wings to some movements where they then take action because of the violence that has been not extended, but that has been enacted upon them. So they then end up fighting back because they've taken all that they can. And so they push whatever it takes as revolutionaries. One, they're willing to die. They're willing to die for the cause. They believe so much in the liberation and the freedom of their people, in the future generations. They're willing to do whatever it takes. And so when you come into it, if you're not aware of the situation, you just see, why are these people hostile? Why are they doing this? Or why did they bomb that? But when you look at the history, you'll find that they've been speaking for a while. They've been making noise for a while, but it has not been, people have not responded to it in the way that they should have to maybe intervene. We see intervention now, but where was the intervention before? And so with people like Steve Biko, they're saying you have to be a revolutionary to bring a message that's going to unify the people. And one of the ways in which you do that is through educating the oppressed, or as you see with Paulo Freire, with the pedagogy of the oppressed, right? So in that, you begin to educate them and you begin to teach them self-awareness and consciousness about who they are, where they are in the world, what is the present situation. And then you, in conversation with them as a leader, begin to talk to them about ways to fix the problem, how to resolve this, how to bring about solutions to begin to deal with this. But you allow them to come up with those ideas. So you empower the people to believe in themselves, to not be afraid of death, and to go out there and fight for what it is they want, which is their freedom, their rights, their land, and so on and so forth. You saw the same fight in South Africa, right? That's what they were doing. They were on 13% of the land, and the white minority had the other 87%, which was the most productive part of the land. They had the least. So they were like, how are you going to take the majority and push them to 13% of the land, and then the other 87% is going to be owned by the minority, and they're going to have that. So no, the people were like, no, we're tired. You've divided us long enough. In Pasa, they've divided them long enough. The people are tired. They will fight back. Wherever you have oppression, it's only but so much a people can take when you look at that over years and decades. So it's always that thing of teaching, education, not just in the school system. That is part of it, but that is also part of the problem. So you're talking about education in the community, going to the people, where the people are. And then once you are able to expand upon that, and once you prepare them, you are able to then, yes, teach those, like in South Africa's case, the white South Africans, right? Then they were able to spread that message to them, because the liberation is for the oppressed and the oppressor, because the oppressor is also, bound in their thinking. Their thinking is backwards. The fact that someone would think that they're superior to another group because of their skin color is already a problem, and it is evidence of there being something psychologically off. So clearly, they needed to be delivered as well. So they needed that education to free them psychologically. Okay. On the other side, like in the case with South Africans, they had to get to the point where they were no longer fearful of the white man, where they were no longer taking and embodying that inferiority complex. So they had to be free from that type of thinking to see who they were, that they were equal to and able to have just as much power and rights as the white man in South Africa, and therefore it was worth fighting for the land that was theirs. You know, that was their land. They had been imprisoned on their own land, and what you can almost compare to concentration camps. Okay, so that's what we see this. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Cool.
Can I interject? Just to interject, you can purchase Steve Biko, The Radical Gospel of Black Consciousness on Sankofa.com. Sankofa.com, and I'm sure Dr. Traci would love to sign them when they come in if you have them sent to the store. Yeah.
As I'm sitting here listening to, like, with your gusto, I told you I am reading this book right now called, y'all probably read it, Let the Circle Be Unbroken. And I haven't read it. You haven't read it yet? Okay, I wasn't the only one out there. Now listen, you know, I feel like people expect us to know and read every single book in this store as Sankofa employees, and it's just unrealistic, just letting y'all know. But I finally got around to Let the Circle Be Unbroken, and she talks about this idea of Namo and how Black people have this innate ability to call out, to ignite fires, essentially, with our words, with our oration. And she gives the example of, you know, a preacher in the church, obviously, and how, you know, we are literally bending to the words of the man that's on the stage who's talking about the word, who's trying to be a conduit of the spirit. And she's talking about how Malcolm X used to rile up our people and get them to do things, and same with Martin Luther King. It's like this innate ability, and Steve Biko obviously had the same gift, this Namo. And I feel like, I think that we all have it, but I think that it's like a chosen few of us that choose to really follow it and use it to provide our people with the necessary information for us to move forward. Because while we don't have the same kind of leaders that we used to have, like a Steve Biko, like a Malcolm X, like a Martin Luther King, we have now put power within our people, the individual people, via social media. And the only problem with that is there is so much information. There's so much misinformation. There's so much confusion on the internet that it's hard to believe who's actually telling the truth. And it's like, how do we find the Steve Bikos of Instagram? How do we find the Steve Bikos of TikTok? Because there can be some activists that are down for the people. There could be some activists that are getting paid by Amazon to sponsor whatever. And it's like, are we picking and choosing how we're utilizing our gift, the gift of persuasion that Black people have? I feel like I went somewhere, but you know what I'm saying?
I think when thinking about Steve Biko and his charisma, the fact that he was called, there is no question in my mind that he was called, that he was anointed for this time period, you know, for such a time as this. Steve Biko, it was like, God had just poured into him a strength to even take away the fear, that sense of fear. He went forward, and yes, when he spoke, people listened because it was that anointing that was upon his life. It was that charisma. He was very charismatic. People love to listen to him. So I think people like that, they will find you. You will find them. It might not be through matter of fact, they don't need social media. He did not need social media. You see how long ago that was? He did not need social media. Because when someone is that influential and that powerful, the word spreads. Because people experience, they feel something. They are left feeling something. And many people could relate. He was a man of the people, so he spoke to them in a language that they could understand. And I think because of that, that drew them even more to him because he was able to talk about the very things they were living through. So I think as Black people, we do have a certain charisma. I do believe that we have a certain energy that people love to, tap into, but I think when it comes to leaders, it's great to have a leader. But I think it was Ella Baker who was saying like, hey, it's not about one central figure. It's about the people coming together to lift their voices, to make a difference, to make a change. So in most organizations that she was a part of, that was something that she pushed for. Not too many central figures because they target the central figure, but it's harder to target the masses of people. So I think when we get into those messages, yes, we appreciate the Steve Bikos and the revolutionaries of the world who put their lives out there like a Huey Newton, and we judge them so harshly. We judge Biko so harshly even about some of his personal affairs, right? But when you're looking at these are young folk, putting their lives out on the line, becoming targeted by police or law enforcement, being beaten, having their houses bugged, being targeted, being banned, all of these, quickly being thrust out in front of a world, carrying the world kind of on your shoulder, that becomes a burden. Like, I'm responsible for the people, for their freedom, for their liberation, and I have to carry this. So when you have you have that type of fire, you're going to take that message out, and that message is going to hopefully ignite some other people to raise up other leaders, and to raise up other people to speak out and to go into places that he cannot reach. So I think that was the important part of the disciples of the group, those who would go out and create community programs and create small groups or campus groups, go to the different sites to create with the union workers, to start talking to them. That's where you see that fire ignited, and then you hear them say, yeah, I want change, and then you get to change. Yeah, who's going to change? I'm going to change, So you see that, and people pushing, and you're like, yeah. You know how it is when you go to church and you hear a good sermon. You're like, yeah, that's right. I'm going to live right after this. That's right. I'm going to do this. I don't know what happens after church, but at that moment, you're riled up. You're ready, You're like, oh, yeah, I'm ready. I can still listen to clips of Biko, of Malcolm X, of Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm like, yeah, that's right. I'm standing up in the house like, yeah, that's right. Power to the people. And because they just spoke with that level of passion and conviction, and you could tell that the Spirit of God was in them. They believed in what they were saying, and they took it to their grave. They were willing to lay down their lives for that. And that type of thing, so that's what she's getting at, that fire that then ignites other fires and get people excited to go out and do the right thing, though. Look at the civil rights movement. How many people, women and men, put their lives on the line to be bitten by dogs, to be beaten, and all these things to fight for our freedom. So, yeah, I get it. There is what did she call it? Namo? Yeah, that inner thing, that spirit is able to connect to spirit, and you're able to pass that baton on. And that's what I think I talk about Biko and many others about the power of the spoken word. And how when it leaves your lips, it has the power to do things. You can speak life or death. You can speak that positivity. You can speak in such a way that it ignites the person to be able to go forward, and want to get out there and make a change. And for today's times, I think it's really important that we do, because I hear people say, well, where are our leaders? Where is this? I'm like, but where are you? What are you doing? Are you out here campaigning? What are you doing to change your community? I'm not even talking about national level, because a lot of stuff going on at the local levels before it even gets to the national level. And that's what we need our people. But somebody's out there looking for somebody else, but why can't that somebody be you? So it's like we have to hear what that call is for us. And we always wanted to shift that. But what is our responsibility? And that's what he was getting at, that collective responsibility. And the only way we can get there is as individuals to find that within ourselves and to, want to fight and continue the liberation struggle.
Shay. You spoke about disciples, you spoke about the living word, and also the ability to not have fear and the willingness to lay down your life for a revolution. Can you talk about other ways that you compare Steve Biko to Jesus and Jesus's walk and story?
Oh yeah. Oh man. Okay. So there were many comparisons. The death was one that was really amazing. Then I'll just go back, because when you think about the crown that was put on Jesus' head and it was beaten, so he had injury in his head. Well, Steve Biko's head was rammed into a wall 3 times. Okay, so that was his head injury. Because of the shackles and the type of, iron cuffs and things that they had him in, it injured his wrists, his ankles, and his feet, which were the same type of injuries that Jesus had, with his wrists, his hands, his feet and ankles, because of the nails put in from him being hung on the cross, right from the crucifixion. So you see some of those things that I was not expecting to find. I did not expect there to be a resemblance. But then just in his life, that willingness to lay down one's life, the willingness to, the message of teaching love of oneself and love of one's neighbor. So how can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? So that's why it was very important for them to teach about having this relationship with God in such a way that you understood that you were God's creation, that God purposed and meant for you to be here. God did not make you inferior. You were created in the image and likeness of God, just like a white person was created in the image and likeness of God. So therefore, you don't look at yourself in an inferior way. You learn to love yourself, because it's like, who taught you to hate you? You should love yourself because God created and made you in love. And so it's like, once you start to focus on that idea of self-love, then that's something you can actually spread to others, because the love thing is freeing. And when you begin to love yourself like that, and you understand that relationship in reference to God, you also lose a sense of fear, okay, which is another thing that they were fighting against. And so that's that. But then it's also this sharing the word with the disciples. That was very much like Jesus, right? Going out into the community amongst the people to give them things, a word that would heal, that would bring liberation and freedom, psychologically and spiritually. Well, that was the basis of most of what Biko was talking about. He wanted people to be free psychologically, but he also wanted them to be free spiritually, because he understood if they did not have the spiritual freedom, they would not have the faith and fortitude, the endurance to continue the fight, because they wouldn't have any hope. All right. So then you have that aspect of it, but then beyond, grasping that sense of hope and self-love, then how did that spell out in the community? What did that look like in society? What did that look like in a situation where you were oppressed and had to get free from your oppressor? You had to understand that it is not God's will that you be oppressed. So he's like, he had to get that into the minds of the people, that this is not your God-given situation. This is not how it is supposed to be. You have to fight to get out of this. And he was like, God just not going to be coming down doing stuff. You have to do it yourself. Faith without works, is dead. So you have to put these things into action. And And so that's what you saw him doing. So a lot of the work was self-reflection, as was the case with Jesus. The work was self-reflection, like, where are you at in life? What is your consciousness about who you are? Being aware of you, being aware of your thoughts, your mindset, because that's what he's dealing with. Because the more you're able to come out of that, the more you're able to see God, the more you're able to have that level of freedom, you can embrace and deal with the rest. And I think it was that type of liberating word, that Biko would speak, that would bring hope to those who heard the message of Black consciousness. Like, I don't have to live in this anymore. You mean I can have rights? We can have political freedom here. We can have economic freedom. You mean that we can be living on the productive parts of the land as well? We can get our land back. We don't have to be on these Bantustans. We don't have to be divided as a people. And yes, that was the case, because you notice Jesus was very inclusive, okay? But he did make it a point to say to his people, he wanted to deliver them first and then those outside. And so you saw that with Biko. He said, my focus are the Black folk. After I finish dealing with my Black folk, then we can help the white folk. But right now, we are the ones that have a dilemma. And we have to be the vanguard. We have to be the voice for our people. We can no longer allow that to be the liberal white man or white woman being our voice, because they will never be able to speak and fight for us the way we will, because they're not the ones being kicked. They're not the ones being oppressed. They're not the ones being stripped of their rights. They're not the ones being stripped of their culture. It's not them. It is us. We're experiencing that, and they're not going to give it the same level of passion, okay, and effort that we will. We appreciate them and what they do. We thank you, but we have to be the ones to be out on the front line for our own cause. And so I see that in that sense of fighting for the social change, as Jesus was dealing with the Roman Empire, as he was dealing with the chief priests, okay, the Jewish chief priests that were off the chain too. He was dealing with systemic mess, and so was Steve Biko. So they're like, hey, in order to deal with this, we have to continuously speak truth to power. And they both had to teach that to the people without fear, because it's going to cost you something. And for Jesus, it was his life. Yeah. And so for Biko as well.
I'll Traci, goodness. I have one more question.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So as you're talking, I'm thinking about how we learn about people like Steve Biko, and how we learn about these movements, like even here with our own movements. Everyone loves to talk about the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. And then I just came back from Brazil, and I was just learning about this is Brazil's Black History Month, and they have a Black Consciousness Day in Brazil. But like, what I'm noticing is that there'll be all these big moments and these big movements, and then afterward, people don't know. People don't know what happened. People don't even know who Steve Biko is. People don't know, so I'm wondering, what is the level of consciousness right now in South Africa versus us and maybe another part of the Pan-African diaspora? Because it seems like we have a lot of grand stories of how we have overcome for our rights, and it seems like maybe give it 20 years and everyone's back to business as usual, or everyone's not aware of how much it took just for them to get to here. And I think it sets us back, it definitely sets us back here, and we're of the top conscious people, Black people in the world, which is insane. But
I think that in South Africa, they are conscious. You're always going to have a group of, people within society that are not going to be as informed. They're not going to be as aware. Like we experience here in the United States in the Black community, right? There are some who haven't been exposed to a certain level of knowledge or, Black consciousness or that type of literature. so they may not be as aware. Well, in South Africa, they are quite conscious. You have people fighting for women's rights, right? You have people still fighting for education, because they were talking about in Steve Biko's day, Bantustans and in their education systems, and how deplorable they were, and how they weren't teaching South Africans their history. It sounds familiar, right? And about the heroes and heroines of their own society, and what that meant, how damaging that was to their children, and that they grow up more assimilated into white culture instead of as Black, proud South Africans aware of their own history and culture. So with that, you saw them becoming more and more aware. And I think it's always that evolving. So in South Africa now, you see them dealing with education, protection of children, better schools, and so on. Even the political front, making sure they have the best candidates, and you see them fighting and going on and on. So you see them speaking out a lot when it comes to, health disparities, HIV/AIDS. We saw what happened with COVID. So you continue to see that, because the blueprint of apartheid is still there. You can still see it. You can still feel it. I was so surprised when I went, I was like, oh my gosh. When we were in Cape Town, I was like, Jesus, it looked like Europe, until we went to Johannesburg, and I was like, oh, Black people, my people, because that's what you thought when you, landed. But it's, they're still dealing with racism and, dealing with discrimination and various aspects within society. So I think here, as well around the world, we have to stay engaged. It's always going to be someone passing on that baton. So just like right now, we see this fight to have our history taught in school. Well, we know that we work towards that. We hope for that, but that can't be our only avenue. We have to be able to educate within our communities, within our households. We have to expose our children, our families and communities to information that would help continuously liberate them and keep that fire lit, right? And I think with that type of education, beyond the school system, right? Beyond the university, beyond K through 12, through all of that, that we have to be mindful to share this type of history with our children, so that they keep in mind, because otherwise they think that this is okay, this is the way that it's been, this is the way it's supposed to be. And it's like, oh, no. Which is why when we tell our history, we can't start from an entry point of slavery, right? We have to go beyond that so that people understand, oh, how did we enter into slavery? Because when you don't see the human aspect of a person, and all you see is that which makes them inferior based on how society has treated them and responded, reacted to them, or labeled them and define them, you'll never see them as human, fully human. So you have to start with the earlier parts of history and then move your way in so that you understand. But imagine those that think that the entry point is colonization, periods, when they were oppressed and subjugated, or when they were enslaved, or so on and so forth. That already starts them at an entry point of inferiority. So it is very important to create those opportunities for education, I think, and to spread that message through our communities, so that it is always there, so that they're always aware of what things need to change in society, what they need to fight for, and what they need to do to make a difference. I think that you can never stop. It can't. We are not in a situation where we are totally free. So clearly, this is a time in which we have to fight. The liberation struggle isn't over, nowhere near it. Matter of fact, they're trying to take it back some decades. So we have to, and whoever's listening, if you're not fired up, get fired up. If you haven't found your inner flame, find it, because we need you in our communities. Okay, we don't have to worry about you being a national leader. Yeah, we need you to start at home. We need you to start in your schools. We need you to start wherever you are to make a difference. Write the book, create the program, start the movement, do the organization, because we need you, our people need you, the Black world needs you.
You heard that right. That's your call to action. You didn't know. Dr. Traci said, get to work.
Do we have any questions from the audience for Dr. Traci?
Hello, Dr. Traci. My name is Philip Gregg. I'm a current Howard student. I personally have never taken any of your classes, but I know many of my friends who are currently in your classes and who have taken your classes. And I was wondering, as a current professor, how do you pour into your students and encourage them to tap into their own Black consciousness and use their voice as a student within DC?
Well, in class, I give them the information and I allow an opportunity for presentations, right? They can focus on any area. They can present it in whatever way they like. I give them, options, many options. And because I believe in sharing in the sense that I don't come in with the attitude that I know it all, that I know everything. Students come from different walks of life. They've had various experiences, and I believe what their brain can be very enriching to our learning experience as a collective. So in class, I kind of give them the opportunity to kind of push them. I'm talking about me being pushed out of my comfort zone, right? But I push them outside their comfort zone because a lot of them don't like to speak or be in front of people and speak. Some of them have never even thought about what they may truly be interested in, what lights a spark for them. So that becomes an opportunity for them to delve a little bit deeper into that. I try when in class to talk about early African civilization and move that on into more current affairs. I allow them the opportunity to seek out current affairs, okay, to kind of engage them on the different thoughts. And we talk about everything. So when they're bringing in articles, like for instance, I'll have them present an article about what's going on. They can choose any country within Africa, things like that. And then they bring some news to us about something that's going on. And they'll talk to us, tell us about it, and they ask questions, and it creates discussion in class. So it's at this moment we begin to talk and share, and we might share about different ways in which we can use these things in our communities. Or some may tell us about things they're already doing in their communities, and then how others can maybe be a part of it. And I always speak a lot of positive affirmation over my students. I tell them I love them. I tell them how wonderful they are. I tell them that they are inspiring, that God made them awesome and beautiful, never to forget how powerful they are, never to forget the greatness that is within them and the power they have within them to change, okay? To make change wherever that they can do whatever they set their heart to and beyond. And so with that, I'm always pouring that into them as well. Giving them resources or telling them about various opportunities. I introduced them to spaces like Sankofa, okay? Because some of them haven't been here. So when I have karaoke nights or something like that, they come, some have brought their parents with them, and they come in and they buy books, they share, and so they're able to be exposed to book talks and other conversations that happen here, as well as the many books that are on the shelves. So those are some of the ways that I do it. And then thinking about Biko and Jesus as well, the foundation of everything that they did was love. And I'm one of those people, you ought to love what you do and who you do it for. And I love Howard students. So I give it my all because I want them to succeed. I want them to win. And they will.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have a question for Dr. Traci?
Dr. Traci, what do you hope that the reader gets from your book? Like, what do you hope is the lasting feeling? And can you speak to what you might think Steve Biko will want from us also?
Yes. Okay, yes. I think that's the sneaky part of the book. Most of the things in here are what other books are banned for. Because I'm talking about Paulo Freire. I'm definitely highlighting Biko throughout the whole thing. As much as I can put an excerpt of Biko's, because the importance is in his message, right? That's where the spirit, the fire is in the book. So I think that he offers a plan, many plans, to help deal with national sin, if you will, how to fight against that, how to stand against that, how to organize, how to unify, how to remove fear, how to become connected to God through what he uses like Black theology, okay? And through that, how to find oneself, again, to be conscientized or to reach this highest level of awareness within yourself about who you are and where you are in the world, and being able to connect to others in that way. And so at that point, you become agents of change, but you become more powerful as you unify. So he was like, don't allow the enemy to divide you. Don't be divided. Don't be so divided, because you won't be able to get things done. Don't be divided by class. Don't be divided by religion. The little things that we use to divide ourselves within our own community, colorism, all these, we can go on and on about different denominations, so on and so forth. But he was like, no, look beyond all of that. Different organizations, you're doing the same thing. Come together and do things. Speak to the community, speak to the people, take the people and speak. Once you have those masses together, go speak to your national leaders, go speak to your local leaders, allow your voice to be heard. Your voice is very powerful, and it's even more powerful together. So in many cases, he does give blueprints that show how effective grassroots mobilization can be when organizing and being able to connect to the people. This is when he did this was without social media, as we understand social media today, right? They had newspapers and things like that. But to get to the point where he had a funeral with 22,000 people in it, the different uprisings that were there, this man was his message was powerful, but it's because he was following this blueprint with this type of grassroots mobilization and unifying, and a message of love. And with that, he was able to bring all of that together, and because of it, make change. And what he wanted, he ended up getting, which was that political freedom. And for others to gain that spiritual freedom, that self-awareness, and psychological freedom. He also was very committed to community work, like through theater. He knew and understood everyone wasn't going to be an academic. Everyone wasn't going to pick up a book and read it. So he took the message to them in different ways. So theater became, because he's like, they're hearing, they're seeing, it's going to stick with them. So that was one of the ways in which they were able to give a message. They had a clinic. They opened a clinic. So that was another way of reaching the people. They had pantries, They were able to help the people. So as you can see, his hands were dirty. When I went to South Africa, I was mad because I was supposed to go to the university. But they didn't tell me that I would have to catch another plane, but I was willing to do it. But then they told me that the university was closed. I was like, what? I talked to these people. What are you saying? But I saw what was happening, because if I would have left to go there, I would not have had the opportunity to be with the people, because it was a service trip. So I was able to go to the orphanage. We went to churches. We talked to the grandmas. They call them the go-go's, right? The grandmas, all right? And we were able to talk to the elders. We were able to talk to students at the university. We went to a school. We talked to teachers. We went to the marketplace and talked to those who were marketing women and men who had their own small businesses. We went to a women's shelter with women who experienced domestic violence and other life situations that had them there, and more like a safe house sort of kind of, okay? And their children. We were seeing children who were impacted by HIV/AIDS. We went to a clinic, a local clinic, okay, to see what that was like in those experiences. So all these different situations, and where we were able to be with the people. We went into the townships. We went into more of like the settler areas, okay, where the homes were just made like shacks, like they put together wood, and with a metal top roof with tires and so on. So we were able to go in that way as well. And if I had gone there, I would have missed all of that, because I was able to be where the people were. which is where he was. And so the only way you can make change, you have to be where the people are. That's how he got his nickname Bantu Biko, because he was a man of the people. He understood them. He spoke their language. He never tried to rise above them. He tried to always communicate and connect with them. And I think we have to do more of that. We have to communicate. We have to connect with the people in our communities. It's like, when was the last time you even been to a women's home in your community? When was the last time you visited an orphanage in your community? When you went to the houses of worship within your community? These are where the people are. Okay? It was life-changing for me, because then I understood his passion. I could feel his tears. I could feel his pain. I could also see his love. I could understand why he was willing to give his life. I could understand why the fight. But had I missed all of that, I would have missed it, because I was so busy trying to get to a library to look at a pamphlet when the pamphlet was in 3D, or 4K now. Okay, right before me, I had everything that he was talking about was right there in front of my face. It changed my whole perspective on him and his mission. And his mission is not just his, but it's all of our responsibility within the Black community, wherever we are in the Black world, throughout Africa, the African diaspora. We have a responsibility, because of global white supremacy is everywhere. And it continues to oppress and subjugate our people. And it's time for us to maintain that political freedom, get it for real. But we can't have true political freedom without economic freedom. And that's what he was also pushing, keeping that money in our communities. But again, neither one of those are possible if we don't have spiritual, and psychological freedom, which is necessary. So until we have that sense of awareness and believing in ourselves and who we are, who God created us to be, and who we are in the world, and not what someone else told us we are to be in this world, then we'll understand our role and our mission in making sure that this world shows a truer face of humanity. That was his quest. He was seeking out a truer humanity where we all are accepted and treated as human beings equally. Okay, yes, where we can be based upon our character and not the color of our skin. So that was his mission. So I hope that we all will carry with us that truest sense of humanity and fight for that and not be afraid.
Thank you so much, Dr. Traci, for coming out and imparting wisdom on all of us, per usual. Buy the book. It's online. It's on sankofa.com, www.sankofa.com.
Yes. And to add on the economic tip again, and going back to the freedom real quick, just to bring it about the bookstore. I want to thank the founders, Haile, Sharik, and Salome Wyatt, for having the mental freedom and the capacity of creating this space, this free space. It's a free space, but it's not free to maintain. I just want to say that. Thank you. It's not free to maintain. So if you see any books on the shelves that you like, please don't hesitate to, take it home with you. Please don't hesitate to go online to sankofa.com and just browse our thousands of books that we have available. It really helps us maintain ourselves, not only for ourselves, for the sake of the founders or the people who work here, but for the community. There we go.
For the community. Okay. Absolutely.
And the film. We're talking about this education, and Haile is working on a film to be able to share more of this history. And so I think it is very important. So they do have opportunities to donate to help make sure that that film is able to be completed and done. So please, when you go online, I believe they have a QR code, something on there where you can actually donate. Every bit helps, because like they said, this is a Black business, and we will go out, and I know a lot of us just spent a lot of money on Black Friday. And I didn't. This is one time I didn't. I was like, I'm waiting because they're gonna have the more sales with 40% off, and at least I hope they will. But anyways, no. But we will spend money on things like that, but it would be great for you to give back to your own community. And every little bit helps, and every little bit is a lot of bit, because together those dollars add up. So we thank you for your love and support as well. So, but that's part of the message, is supporting that type of community work. And this is community work. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Traci.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
We appreciate
And thank you all for being here.
Okay, stay tuned for our next our next event is coming up, Black Space. How do you pronounce it?
Amadou Kuyate is right there in the back in the lime green.
Good
He will
thing.
be on the stage in a little less than an hour. Yes. Yes. And yes. Tickets are on sankofa.com as well. So stick around. Thank y'all.
Yes. Turn off.